On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors finally changed their starting lineup this week, and it might be too late for it to matter. We'll get into why that is. We'll take your mailbag questions, and it's another round of Fake Trade Friday coming up on today's show. Thanks so much for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, December the 29th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. We're covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the website that don't work so good at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can come and join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link to join is in the description of the podcast. It's free to do it, and it's a great little community we got building around the show. Lots of friendly faces in there, talking ball, spiraling, all the good stuff. It's a great spot. Come and hang out. We'd love to see it. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Of course, a reminder, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe, follow, rate, review, tell a friend. It's always appreciated when you do that. You can also find us on YouTube. You can subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and you will never miss an episode when it goes live, which is perfect for our everydayers out there, of which all of you should be at this point. And if you're not, get on board. It's fun listening to me talk every day. Of course, haven't been talking every day this week. We are back after a bit of a Christmas break. The thing is, usually I would record during this week, but my parents recently moved to the country with very, very bad internet infrastructure. And so it's a nice baked-in excuse to take a little break and unplug, but I was not able to get shows out this week. But that's okay, because the Raptors have blessed us with a loaded weekend schedule with some pretty intriguing games. So you're going to get today's show where we're going to take your mailbag questions. We'll talk about the week that it's been. We'll get into a Fake Trade Friday. We are also, though, going to talk about the Celtics game on Saturday and, of course, the Pistons game that everybody's terrified about on Sunday morning as well. So you have that to look forward to. With that, though, let's dive on into today's episode. Like I said, we got some mailbag questions coming up later in the show. We've got a Fake Trade Friday Indiana Pacers edition to get to in the last segment. But I wanted to take a sec off the top just to kind of, summarize my takeaways from a pretty weird week of Toronto Raptors basketball. Of course, you had the Jazz game on Saturday, which featured a Scottie Barnes masterclass and also a masterclass in pissing away a 17-point lead. The defense completely falling off a cliff, as it has been wont to do this season. Followed up, of course, by a couple days off for the holidays, much needed, I'm sure, and a win over the very, very bad Washington Wizards that featured the starting lineup getting changed 30 games into the season, only about 24 games after we, I think, realized this lineup maybe wasn't very good, but they got it done, and that was encouraging to see, if nothing else. And that's kind of where I'm going to focus this one, right? We've talked plenty about the defense and why it's been just a mess for the Raptors this season. I think that was very much on display in that Jazz game. If you want a deep dive on the defense, last Friday's show with Dave Dufour, a very good place to go for that. But let's just kind of focus mostly on the lineup change and what it means for the Raptors. And frankly, my big takeaway on it, which it's good, undeniably, it's good that they've done this. Obviously, it's not perfect. Point guard play is important. The Raptors still lack that. Scottie Barnes, there were moments in that game against the Wizards where you could see the limitations of Scottie as like a full-time point guard. He's not always going to be able to burn by a guy from a standstill. Denny Avdia locking him up a couple times here and there. Denny Avdia does that to guys sometimes, but you saw some of the things you'll have to work around with Scottie Barnes being your nominal point guard in the lineup. But generally, like the infusion of space and shooting and a better informed Gary Trent Jr., it makes a lot of sense for this team. Not only because it frees possessions up for Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam to go to work that were previously being used in the starting lineup by Dennis Schroeder, but it also moves Dennis Schroeder to the bench where he was bloody awesome. He was a plus 29. He had 10 assists. He conducted the second unit beautifully. along with a couple of rotation changes. We saw Jalen McDaniels back in the mix, Otto Porter Jr. back in the mix, and God, please let Otto Porter Jr. be back in the mix for the long haul here, because he just makes those lineups make a whole lot more sense, as does Dennis Schroeder. And so while the starters didn't actually win their minutes, they kind of got waxed in their minutes defensively in particular. The offense was very good. Defense was a mess. I still think this is the right move for the team in their current context. The issue is it might have come too late for it to really matter to the sort of big picture decision making that this team has to make, right? Like, it's, if you're going to use the next 10 to 15 games of hopefully this new version of the rotation in the starting lineup as sort of your be all end all for decision making, that feels like maybe not the best decision making process. Maybe the Raptors already have their minds made up. Maybe they know what they intend to do at the deadline. Maybe they know that they're going to try to find a deal for Dennis Schroeder before the deadline for a contender or something like that. Maybe they know that one of OG or Pascal is on the way out. Maybe both. And they know that they're going to be sort of skewing more towards a Scottie-centric vision anyway, so why not get a head start on it? You know, you don't want to assume where the front office is at. I know all the reporting is out there. You know, Woj with cryptic replies to people on Twitter, you know, saying the Raptors still haven't decided on stuff. That's very possibly true. They've taken a while to decide on things in the past. You would hope that this change in lineup this late on into the season is not going to fully inform what their next decisions are going to be. Obviously, there's still information to be gleaned to see how the starting lineup looks. I think Gary Trent Jr. in particular, his future becomes very much into focus between now and the deadline if he's in fact starting with this group. But it might just be too late in the game. They wasted a lot of time collecting information about a lineup that we knew all the information we needed to know about. We knew that Dennis Schroeder was not cut out for the role he was asked to play, over sort of extended, miscast as a lead guard. You know, we'll get some good information about what he can do as a backup, sure, but like we already know that's you know that's not part of really the equation here. We missed a lot of time getting information about what Scottie, Pascal, and OG look like as more central sort of a trio with less in terms of interference from a guy like Dennis Schroeder coming in. I'm not surprised Dennis looked great coming off the bench. He's looked great coming off the bench his entire life, and I would hope that, you know, you know, the first game out, obviously it's one game. It's the Wizards. It doesn't mean a whole lot, but I hope that we can kind of have a realization here that it's way cooler and better to have the third best backup point guard in basketball, which I think Dennis Schroeder kind of is, if he's in that role, than the 28th best starting point guard in basketball. And hopefully that sort of slight reshuffling of role really helps him kind of take off, and whether building up his trade value or just helping the second unit be more functional, that's all very good. But yeah, we're kind of late now to get information on this starting group. We know there's a lot of data that suggests that Scottie, Pascal, OG, and Gary together are very, very good. They're a plus 21.6 net rating over just 163 possessions this season. I don't think that's enough possessions, and I don't know if they have the runway now to get those guys enough possessions to really have enough data to go on to make grand sweeping conclusions. And it's probably problematic if they're waiting till right now to make those grand sweeping conclusions. But yeah, it's not going to be enough to change the information we've gleaned really, or give us enough of a sample to really know anything for sure. And it's also not going to be enough for the Raptors to kind of crawl themselves back into this thing in a meaningful way. They're 12-18. That's a big hole. They have to play at a pretty serious pace if they want to even get back to 500. And look, the Eastern Conference after the top 7 is kind of not great right now. The Pacers are not playing very well. The Hawks and the Nets and the Bulls are not exactly inspiring competition. And so there's a chance here that the Raptors, with this reshaped lineup, could go on a bit of a run. But does that in turn cause them to make decisions that are based on very short runways of sample? It's all very problematic. And this lineup change should have been made way long ago, and it wasn't. So we got to live with the results of that. So that's kind of where I'm at on the lineup change. I'm glad it happened. I think they looked good, again, against the Wizards. So all of the caveats, all of the grains of salt being salt bayed upon the result, like it's only so much you can take from it. We'll get a lot more information, I'm sure, against the Celtics and maybe a desperate Pistons team that is like trying to get a win and really playing like every game is the playoffs for them. You know, maybe we start to get more info here as we get into a tougher part of the schedule as well. But again, it just feels like so late in the game for this change to be made that I'm not sure the fruits of that change are really going to bear much between now and the deadline. Maybe it does. Maybe they're so good between now and the start of February. Maybe they just blitz teams and the Wizards were just the first of many casualties on the Raptors steamroll up the standings. That's possible. Sure. The team makes more sense right now. Definitely. But I think that's probably, considering what we've seen so far this season, not the most likely thing in the world. The roster is still very, very flawed, has a lot of issues, guys not playing well, et cetera, et cetera. The defense remains a total mess. And if the defense isn't good, no lineup change is going to do anything to fix what this team is doing. So yeah, it just feels like it could have been done way sooner. I'm happy it's happened now. And I hope we see the sort of commitment to a revamped rotation going forward. One thing I will say, I would like to see Precious Achiuwa more involved. They only played 10 minutes, and I think it was mostly because Jakob Poeltl got in foul trouble. It seemed like he was on track, maybe for a DNPCD, or at least very sparing work in the game against the Wizards. I think Precious has been one of their better players over the last month, damning with faint praise to be sure. But I also think there's some juice there with Precious playing with the big three plus Gary Trent Jr. That lineup's been pretty fun in very, very small samples, but I think we got to see more of that. They've played exactly 6 possessions together this season. I think there's more there. I would like to see more from that group over the course of the next little while here and more Precious involved. But that's kind of my 10,000 foot takeaway on the lineup change. Happy it happened. Not sure it changes all that much considering how late it is in the game. And if it does change a lot, that probably raises some questions about the decision-making process of the front office, if you don't already have them. We'll come back on the other side. We'll get into some mailbag questions. We got questions about Gradey Dick, who we had an appearance from in that game on Wednesday against the Wizards. He was 1 for 1 from 3. A beautiful step forward. We'll talk about Grady, talk about some other stuff coming from the mailbag, which is, of course, in the Discord. If you want to get those questions in next time, get in the Discord, ask the questions when I demand that people ask them. Either way, we'll get to all of that coming up in just 1 second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our pals over at Prize Picks, the single best way to go and play daily fantasy sport. It's daily fantasy sports as it should be. It's not you against 1,000 other teams or one single expert in the basement putting together an unassailable roster. No, it's you against the projections. It's that simple. All you got to do is on your entries, make 2 to 6 more or less picks based on what the projections are for given stats for players in your entry. And it's not just for basketball, although it can be for basketball only, but you can do cross-sport entries. Like, for example, in the Specials League, it's with basketball and football both ongoing. You can create leagues with combo projections from football and basketball players and put them into the same entry. That's pretty sweet. So you have receptions for Garrett Wilson up against, maybe points or rebounds for Scottie Barnes, whatever it might be. And you can go and make yourself a little, cross-sport combo league entry on Prize Picks. It's super awesome. Also, of course, Prize Picks has a reboot policy, meaning if you have a player get injured in the first half for either football or basketball, not return in the second half, that player is rebooted, meaning that Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. Go to prizepicks.com and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LOCKEDONNBA, code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to 100 bones with Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, we continue on here. Your first listen of the day. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, reminder, there will be Saturday and Sunday episodes this week talking about Raptors Celtics and Raptors Pistons, so keep an eye out for those as your weekend progresses, and we'll get back to the regular run of things. We'll take Monday off for New Year's Day, and we'll get back to the regular routine of daily episodes beginning on January the 2nd. But yeah, let's dive into some listener questions, shall we? I put the call out in the Discord. There's a couple that were kind of hanging around from before as well, so I'll try to do a mix of recent and outdated ones I have not yet gotten to entertain on the show. Not outdated, just been there for a while. But yeah, let's first dive in to a question from our pal Ben Chapman of the Discord asking, given the needs of the roster, what motivation would the organization have for not having Gradey as part of the rotation other than he looks extremely not ready in a practice setting? I think this is a good jumping off point to just talk about Gradey Dick. And I do think now is the time to probably reincorporate Gradey Dick into what the Toronto Raptors are doing. They are 12-18. They are not very good. What they have been doing so far has not been working. And it feels like Gradey Dick's skill set is desperately needed still on this basketball team. I have talked about this. The offense is getting there. They have been a little bit improved kind of week over week, month over month throughout the season, and it's been encouraging. Credit to Darko Rajakovic where it's due. They have become basically a functional offense, which is very nice to see. In December, they're number 15 in offensive efficiency. They are 18th on the season as of right now. Most recently, I checked on NBA.com. That's like nice. That is like where this team could have, like where you would hope this team would be if you wanted them to have sort of designs on anything this season. Of course, it's been offset by a miserable defense that is not good. It has no identity, no real plan, all that stuff. It's just not been there. But the offense, to its credit, has been improved despite the significant lack of three-point shooting. And I maintain the biggest issue with the offense right now, it's they get bad shooting variance nights. They really, really kind of run hot and cold, as you will when you have a lot of guys who don't shoot a lot of threes on your team and are not very effective at it. You're going to have nights where you're hot and cold. And I think Gradey Dick, just given his pedigree as a shooter, gives them a chance to dodge the shooting variance bullet a little bit more often if he's playing, 12, 15 minutes a night. I think there's a perfect place to drop him into some of these lineups. I think Dennis Schroeder, if he's going to be running the bench, perfect guy to play alongside Gradey Dick. You can have Gradey Dick kind of run around off ball while Dennis runs, traditional pick and roll with whoever's playing at center, whether it's Precious Achiuwa, maybe it's Jakob Poeltl staggered into with bench units, maybe it's Scottie Barnes. Having Gradey Dick work off ball from that, I think is a good idea. I think, I'm actually a pretty big proponent of running some bench units here with Dennis plus Yak and a bunch of shooting between them. Gradey Dick could be perfect there. You can run dribble handoff stuff with Jakob Poeltl with Gradey Dick. I think there are ways to implement him that amplify what he does. And yeah, he's not hit his shot so far this year. He's had his, moments in the G League, of course, where he's had really hot nights, really cold nights. He's been mostly cold at the NBA level outside of one or two games. But I think now is the time when you don't have anything else to lose, really. What you've been doing is not working. Why not have Gradey Dick occupy, say, the role Jalen McDaniels occupied in that game against the Wizards on Wednesday? I'm also not opposed to more Jalen McDaniels if he can kind of get into a rhythm here. I think the ideal version of Jalen McDaniels is a useful player. We've not seen anything close to what that player is so far this year, and it's been troubling. But I do think there's got to be some room here for Gradey Dick to get into the mix because he offers the one thing that this team badly needs, and is three-point shooting, and accurate three-point shooting in theory. The sort of idealized version of Gradey Dick offers that. And again, I think the offense right now is getting into its stuff pretty well. It's the play finishing that's the real problem. They're not having these long spells of, oh God, they can't get even into a set because there's no advantage creation. No, like they are running their stuff, getting into their actions. It's just the finishing has not been there specifically from three for a lot of these games. And I think Gradey Dick stands a chance of offering a little bit more finishing from that spot than, say, Jalen McDaniels would at this point, or like a Chris Boucher. I don't think there's any downside to it. And frankly, to answer Ben's question, I don't think there is a sort of reasonable motivation other than what we're not seeing, stuff going on behind the scenes, just not looking like he's ready for it in practice to keep him out of the mix. And hopefully he can kind of get back into the good graces here in the second half of the season after some run with the G League. That's how these things are supposed to go, right? Another question came on this topic from Loquacious Drew in the Discord. What lineups would you like to see Gradey play with to get him confidence and some shots? Like I said, I think playing in between Dennis Schroeder and Jakob Poeltl as one of the shooting options playing off those guys sounds pretty exciting to me. I think if you could roll out lineups, if Dennis is coming off the bench, Jak is maybe the first sub out, you roll with a Dennis Jak sort of spine of your team with, you can have Gradey Dick, you can have Otto Porter Jr., Gary Trent Jr., maybe staggers in. OG Anunoby might be a really nice fit there as defense, offset by the sort of non-defense of a Schroeder right now. He's not been very good there this season, or a Gradey Dick. That could make some sense. Obviously, playing with the good players as well would make a lot of sense. Having him be a fifth guy, an agent of spacing, playing alongside Scottie, Pascal, and OG would be pretty nice. I'm very pro testing it out to see what you can get with a lineup of Scottie, OG, Pascal, Gradey Dick, and Gary Trent Jr., the full extreme shooting lineup. It might be terrible at defense, but this team is terrible at defense most of the time. So what is there to lose? Those are a couple examples of lineups I'd like to see Gradey get worked into. Let's get into one last question here, and it's a bit of a look back, a retrospective on the news and the rumors and scuttlebutt of the summer. Gabriel asks, during Christmas, me and my uncle discussed if the front office should have made the pull for Dame. In hindsight, I believe they should have, as Damian Lillard would be addressing some of the biggest, huge concerns on the team, and they're lacking floor spacing and guard play. Do you think it was a mistake that the front office didn't pull the trigger on a deal for Damian Lillard? Look, I think my feelings were pretty known on this. I would have loved to trade for Damian Lillard. I think with the Raptors with Damian Lillard are a pretty damn good team right now. He's very good. If you've seen what he's doing in Milwaukee, he's like captaining one of the best offenses in basketball and up to very, very Damian Lillard things. He's excellent. He would have been awesome on this team. Him in the Dennis Schroeder spot, just like a massive, massive upgrade. I talked about Dennis being like the 28th best starting point guard in basketball. Damian Lillard's like a top 5 point guard in basketball. It would have been a pretty substantial upgrade. Obviously here, if it was the sort of posited Scottie Barnes for Dame thing, obviously you don't do that. And I think the Raptors were smart in hindsight, despite me being a big dum-dum with no future thinking in my brain, being like, trade Scottie for Dame, who cares? That would have been bad. And they're right to have not listened to me on that one. That was me being a little bit overzealous and a little bit, I think, skeptical about Scottie Barnes, and maybe fairly so. He's, of course, blown all of that skepticism to pieces. Scottie Barnes is the truth. He's incredible, and he should be untouchable in any conversations going forward. He is that good. Credit to him for making a fantastical, unbelievable, sort of unprecedented leap. It's been an absolute treat to watch, even when the team has been not very fun to watch. But anyway, on the Dame thing, if it was an OG Anunoby and stuff package, yeah, obviously I think OG for Dame, you do that if you're the Raptors. It addresses the need that you badly need, filled, all of that stuff. I think you do that. The problem is I don't think it was all that realistic in, sort of now taking account of all the reporting that's come out that Dame sort of secretly behind the scenes went to Joe Cronin, the GM of the Blazers, and said, yeah, the Bucks would be fine, figure something out there when the Heat thing kind of fell apart. And I do think Drew Holiday, the sort of premium that the Blazers could get back for Drew Holiday from a contender like the Boston Celtics, that was, I think, a thing they felt better about than getting a premium back for an expiring OG Anunoby. I really think that's kind of what it came down to. The Raptors could have had OG on the table. They could have had a big offer on the table. Bobby Webster said on media day that it was basically the biggest offer they've ever put on the table for a guy that they had on the table for Damian Lillard. They, of course, they'll say that because the deal didn't happen and they can say whatever they want, but I don't have any reason to not believe that they didn't push hard for Dame. Hell, it seems like Shams Charania had a Raptors Dame trade tweet ready in the drafts. Like it did feel like a thing. And so I don't think you can really look back and say, as much as the Raptors have missed on some opportunities here and there, I actually don't think they missed on the Dame thing that badly. It seems like they put a pretty competitive offer out there, but the forces at play, Dame wanting to go to Milwaukee, the Drew Holiday of it all, I think that is kind of what tilted them. I also think if they get OG, the DeAndre Ayton thing maybe doesn't happen. I think that was important for the Blazers as well here. So, Damian Lillard would be awesome on the Raptors. There's no doubt. They would not have the problems they currently have. They would probably be a top 6 team in the Eastern Conference right now, considering how bloody well Scottie Barnes is playing. But alas, didn't happen. Can't dwell on it too much. And again, I don't think it's that big a mistake. If it came down to, you give us OG and he's on Dame's on the Raptors and you don't do that, sure, I think that's bad. But from the reporting, I don't really think that's how it went down. And the Raptors were maybe kind of drawing dead anyway. So is what it is. We'll come back on the other side. We will round out the show with a fake trade Friday. Of course, the new thing we're going to try to do every Friday leading into the deadline. This will be the second one we get to because we skipped it last week because Dave Dufour was on to just talk about ball, which was decidedly not Fake Trade Friday friendly. Either way, we will get to this week's Fake Trade Friday coming up in just 1 second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our pals over at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in all the land. And as the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, same-game parlays, which are a really fun way to do it, and so much more. Of course, the Toronto Raptors play the Detroit Pistons on Saturday. It's a game where the Raptors will surely be favored heavily just because Vegas does it that way. But man, oh man, if you want to do the happiness hedge and prepare yourself for the worst and the Raptors losing to the Pistons, which I don't think they're going to do, but knock on wood all over, maybe you go and put a little money on the Pistons, at least covering, maybe winning. And so if the Raptors do lose, at least you get some money out of it and you don't feel too bad. I don't know. That's just a suggestion. It's going to be bad if they lose that game, but you can make it less bad by going to FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season or continue the NBA season, whatever your fancy. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and of the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, rounding out the show here. Thanks so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. Reminder, you can go and find Locked On Sports Today 24/7 on YouTube. Actually, you'll be directed there. If you're watching this video right now on the YouTube, you'll be directed right to Locked On Sports 24/7. It is all day, 24/7 Locked On podcast covering the biggest stories in all the big sports and, of course, the local stories covered by the local experts on those biggest stories as well, as you come to know and love from the Locked On Network. So go check it out over there. Locked On Sports Today 24/7. Okay, rounding out the show, it's Fake Trade Friday time. Of course, the rules of this are I'm very good at fake trades, and so I'll share a fake trade. It's very good. It's unassailable and all of that, and I'll just talk about why it works for both teams, why it probably won't happen, because that's the deal with most trades, unfortunately, and you guys can tell me if it was good or bad. Of course, it's good. All of my trades are good. There's just nothing you can do about it. It's just the way of the world. Of course, tongue in cheek, all fake trades are bad on some level because they, lack full context. They lack proper player evaluation and all that good stuff, but they're fun and silly. And I think in some cases pretty informative about like what teams can expect and hope to do come deadline time. And so today, based on, the reports from, Michael Scotto and others about the Indiana Pacers maybe being in on Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby, I've got myself a Raptors-Pacers fake trade for Fake Trade Friday, and it goes as such. I'll show it on video for those watching. I'll read it off for those listening. Of course, the Toronto Raptors here receive Miles Turner, TJ McConnell, Aaron Nesmith, and Ben Shepherd for Jakob Poeltl, OG Anunoby, and Precious Achiuwa. That's a big one. Turner, McConnell, Nesmith, Shepherd for Poeltl, Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa. No picks involved. Maybe there will be picks involved. I don't really know. A thing to note here, Aaron Nesmith's contract is poison pilled, so that kind of screws with the math a little bit here, but I think it's workable considering what Aaron Nesmith's going to make on his next contract and all that stuff. Either way, the finer particular points of these deals are the types of things where there's a will, there's a way, and teams will figure it out if they really want to get a deal done. This is more just thought exercise and not, salary cap approved ironclad trades that will, certainly pass through on a trade call legality wise. Either way, there's a few reasons why I like this trade, kind of for both teams. Again, it's a big one. Miles Turner being involved is surprising, probably. It's a big one. He's been on the Pacers forever. He's avoided trade speculation forever. Been in trade speculation forever, avoided being traded forever. But I do think this one kind of makes sense for both teams. And here's why. The Raptors, in this case, of course, they're getting, I think, basically the perfect center to pair with Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam if they want to go forward with those two guys as their core. I think a Siakam, Barnes, Turner front court, you get shooting from two of those spots in Turner and Scottie Barnes. You get rim protection from Turner, of course. He's been pretty damn good. He's at like 54% allowed at the rim this season for a team that's otherwise really bad at defense. He's been asked to clean up all sorts of messes on the Pacers so far this year, and he's doing a pretty darn good job, but while also being a very nice offensive player who would fit absolutely perfectly next to Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam. Clear space for those guys to go to work, knock down threes. He's got some closeout attacking juice as well, so that could kind of keep the 1.5 flow of the offense moving and constantly in harmony. I really think Miles Turner on the Raptors, I've said this before, but man, how bloody perfect would that be? It would make me very happy to see. The other part of this too for the Raptors is Aaron Nesmith feels like a very, very good role player guy. Someone who's going to be around the league a long time, doesn't need the ball a ton, is going to hit threes, play maniac defense, rebound better than his size would suggest. I think Aaron Nesmith's a guy, and I think he's a guy who would fit really beautifully alongside Scottie Barnes. You could roll out, for example, like a starting five of Scottie Barnes, Gary Trent Jr., Aaron Nesmith, that's not 5, that's 6 guys. But Scottie, Trent, Nesmith, Siakam, Turner is your top 6. Not so bad. There's lots of shooting there. There's lots of sort of multiplicity you can go with your lineups. You've got Dennis Schroeder. TJ McConnell, of course, comes back in this deal as well to make it so we never have to watch Malachi Flynn play basketball again. Ben Shepherd's like a nice shooting prospect who's kind of blocked right now by all the guards they have in Indiana. I think this trade works nicely for the Raptors. Of course, you got to have it work for both teams. Here's why I think it kind of works for the Pacers. We've seen the effect a pull-up shooting pick-and-roll partner can have on Jakob Poeltl. And boy, oh boy, do I think playing with Tyrese Halliburton would just totally amplify what Jakob Poeltl does well. I think he would be just like a guy with some really nice dive gravity, probably more dive gravity than Miles Turner has right now. Miles Turner feels like more of an outside-in type player. And I think Jakob Poeltl playing with Tyrese Halliburton, you would see him kind of achieve the levels that he hit with Fred VanVleet and then some. Tyrese Halliburton's the type of dude who amplifies guys, makes them better than they might look like they are on paper. And the fit between those two guys, I think will be bloody fantastic. It's not to say the fit between Turner and Halliburton isn't awesome right now. I just think Yak might give them a little bit more balance and, a little more sort of roll gravity going towards the rim. And also the big one here for the Pacers is OG Anunoby gives them the big wing defender they desperately need. And a guy who, because of his ties to Indiana, feels like a pretty realistic dude to re-sign if you're the Pacers as well, which obviously is very important. They do this trade without having to move on from Jarris Walker, their recent high pick, who, I can't imagine they'd be thrilled about moving in a trade, so they get to keep him. They get to add Precious Achiuwa to the mix as like another big man prospect in a bunch of guys who all have like various possibilities of hitting between Isaiah Jackson, Jalen Smith, Precious. You could have Jarris Walker. Like you have a bit of a big man stable there where not everyone's going to hit, but you have a lot of bites at the apple there for someone to hit as sort of the long-term backup behind Jakob Poeltl, who, by the way, at 4 years, $20 million a year, is cost controlled 2 years beyond Miles Turner, and $20 million for Jakob Poeltl, where he's playing in a context that works for him, feels like a pretty reasonable deal. It's probably a bit of a drop back defensively as like a rim protector, but I think you make that back with OG being on the wings for this Pacers team. And I think in general, like those two guys would really give them a little bit more stability around the Tyrese Halliburton of it all. You could roll it a starting lineup of Halliburton, Buddy Hield, OG, Obi Toppin, who's shooting like 37% from 3 this season, and Jakob Poeltl, and have, I think, a pretty good bit of balance that they don't have in Indiana right now. As we're seeing, their defense is just so bad, it's costing them games. And Miles Turner is like kind of part of that a little bit. Obviously, he's in a very difficult context, but he's not exactly like the guy who's saving their defense. So maybe there's some flex there on moving on from him potentially if you're the Pacers as well, as much as, inertia is powerful and Miles Turner has been a Pacer for a very long time. Maybe this is the time to sort of shake things up. It's a proactive move. It's a move that is maybe surprising considering Turner's importance to that Pacers team's success this year. But I do think a move like this could sort of better set them up with fit and balance and stuff like that going forward. I don't know. I kind of feel like this works a little bit. Obviously, Precious is just kind of like another bit of defense for them. He can play the 4. He can play small ball 5 if you need him to. He can kind of slide in and do a bunch of different things. They get a look at him before he hits RFA this summer. I think there's some value to that there as well. You have Andrew Nembhard kind of gets his avenue to minutes cleared up with TJ McConnell out of the mix. You just kind of have him be your backup point guard. Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora fill in the second unit alongside Jarris Walker, Jalen Smith, Precious, Isaiah Jackson on down the line. I don't know. It's maybe not a trade that happens. Like I said, most of these trades don't happen. It's like a 0 to 2.5% chance that any fake trade will ever happen or come to life, and even sort of a close approximation to what the layout is. But I do think this probably addresses both teams' biggest issues. I don't know. I think it sets up the fit around Siakam and Barnes obviously very, very well, but I do think OG and Yak help give a little bit of structural integrity to that Pacers defense that they haven't really had. So that's kind of where I'm at here. I think they can survive in Indiana a lack of shooting from Yak as well because of the rest of the shooting they have on the roster, and Halliburton just being this sort of unbelievable force for offensive creation. I think Yak also offers a little bit more playmaking to kind of give Halliburton a hand than Miles Turner does right now too. So there's that. I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to do anything to get Scottie, Pascal, and Miles Turner together on the same team just to see if it can work, because I've been thinking about it for 3 years. But yeah, that's my fake trade Friday for this one. One last look for those who are watching, if you haven't seen it. Miles Turner, TJ McConnell, Aaron Nesmith, Ben Shepherd for Jakob Poeltl, OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa. Just a good old basketball trade. I'm intrigued. Let me know if you think it's bad or if I'm stupid or whatever. Of course, I'm not stupid. All my trades are good. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back again on Saturday to break down Raptors Celtics. So keep an eye out there. Should be a fun one. Hopefully the Raptors can translate over the nice changes we saw against the Wizards against a real basketball team and not a G League team. That would be pretty swell. Either way, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you again Saturday. Enjoy the game tonight, and keep on enjoying this weird week between Christmas and New Year's where calories don't count and time is fake and all that good stuff. Thank you so much for hanging. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.